And good morning. Welcome everyone to the old school, coming at you live on Saturday morning. Well, not live when you hear this, but it was live for us at some point. So we say good morning to Herr Dr. Bourgeois.
Herr Miller, good to see you there. I know you're not in Texas because you sound far away. Where the heck are you?
I am in the bustling city of Topeka, Kansas.
Why are you laughing?
Well, no one's
Topeka,
ever.
you're casting aspersions this early, and your in-laws are there. Is that right?
Well, my in-laws are there. My in-laws are here. They've been here ever since I first started dating my very lovely bride. So you laugh because Topeka just knows what it is, and it's not what it would like to be, perhaps, but it is what it is. So it's a small provincial capital in the hinterlands of the United States and the flyover country. So
the flyover now. That's not nice either. It's a shot right there.
Shot?
Yeah.
No.
No one would call Texas a flyover country, you know.
Well, because it's not. It's a place of certain economic, cultural, and political import. None of which I'm not sure you could say honestly about Topeka, Kansas. These are very fine people. I love being here. I love hanging out here. It's kind of a cool vibe. But let's not kid ourselves.
Okay, so they bribe you to come there, basically.
Baseball, and the fact that they're very lovely people, and there's good food here. So, what are you going to do?
There you go.
Yeah,
well, I think we want to introduce our guest right away because he can save us from this conversation about Kansas. We tried to do this about 2 weeks ago, exactly 2 weeks ago, with Mr. Paul, Dr. Paul. And my apologies. We'll edit that out because that was an important one. With Dr. Paul Weinhold. So I'm going to introduce Paul, and just we'll get into everything about Dr. Weinhold, but I met him through Great Hearts America, which is a national charter organization, and Paul is the director of continuing education and a good friend. So welcome to the show. Welcome back, Paul.
Hey guys, good to see you all again. Great to be here.
Well, excellent.
Now we do have something to tackle before, no pun intended, before we get started. I want, because Paul is a devoted baseball fan and you, sir, are a devoted sports fan. I wanted to throw something out there before we got into the meat of the discussion today. So 2 weeks ago, the Atlanta Braves were playing the Colorado Rockies in Denver, Colorado. And the Braves have this amazing outfielder by the name of Ronald Acuna Jr. And during the game, one guy came out of the stands, seemingly grabbing Acuna to take a photo, a selfie of some sort. And that was followed shortly thereafter by another guy who seemed to be much more aggressive. And the security immediately put both guys face down on the ground, and were not too subtle about the fact that these two boys had crossed the line. Now, this is kind of similar to what happened last year. Steve, you might recall Monday Night Football. The Rams were playing the 49ers. Some guy ran out into the field with a flare smoke thing, and the linebacker Bobby Wagner said hello in a very abrupt and
he put him in the
fashion.
floor and right in the flare into the field.
Exactly.
Okay.
Nearly buried him. And so some of the commentary, both after the Wagner hit, but then also after what happened on a couple weeks ago, was whether the kind of the over exuberance of security was warranted. You think about someone like Messi. For those of you who don't know, Messi, the famous soccer player, plays at Inter Miami. He actually has a Navy SEAL guy that basically shadows him on the field at all times, running up and down as Messi moves, so that if anything happens, if anyone comes on the field, this guy is on the field right away. Do you think it is fair game for any fan who walks on the field that they're going to get hit and hit hard? Do you think that that's fair? Or do you think that security or other people should take more of a nuanced case-by-case approach?
So I'll chime in here. I'm thinking about a couple of different examples of people running out onto the field, right? Like One would be the college football, like everybody's running out onto the field in celebration of a win, right?
Sure.
Or college basketball, that happens too. I think that's different. Because it's everybody, it's exuberant. Actually,
Still dangerous potentially.
still dangerous. That is
Yeah.
true. But there's just something about that I would want to be able to retain, you know?
Right.
And then there was a lovely moment back. Do you remember? Well, yeah, I don't remember. I don't know whether you guys would remember this. I certainly don't remember it. I remember seeing film of it, like of Hank Aaron's.
I saw
Yes.
that. I saw it live when it happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, and that was a moment, that was another one of these like tense moments like you're talking about, where it's like, what are they going to do, you know?
And what made that situation worse is that Aaron had received a lot of death threats prior to breaking the Ruth record.
Yeah, exactly. So it's one of those like iconic moments in the history of baseball.
Right.
And it ended up being fine. But anyway, that's a long-winded way of saying, actually, yeah, I'm okay if a security guard just flattens someone who runs out onto the field in cases like you're talking about. I just think, look, it's the field of play. Like the whole thing that we're doing here is watching a game that's supposed to be played by the people on the field. You're not supposed to be a part of that. So you cross that line, I'm okay with, some physical violence against you.
I agree with Paul. I mean, I go back to watching the great Monica Seles. That was just over 30 years ago.
Yes.
And so you don't know what these people are going to do. You don't know if they're armed or what, and she was stabbed while at the changeover sitting down and it essentially ruined her career. And she was at the top of the pyramid, and history was changed on that moment. She would have probably had more Grand Slams than Steffi Graf and anybody else. But you just don't know. People are so used to being involved now with the social media, and they get to give their opinions and everything, but there has to be some physical boundary. So I think that one good development is that television coverage, goes away. They don't show it, and they stopped that a long time ago. I think that was a good move.
Right.
But it was a nicer age back in the 70s where people would actually streak. They'd take their clothes off and run into the field. and then it was even more funny when they were tackled.
Or you have Morgana, it's just kind of innocent. Everyone kind of agrees that this is okay, sort of thing. This is not like, right after the Seles thing, that Kansas City coach got knocked down by two kids from the Chicago White Sox, the south side of Chicago. And they were beating that guy up for about 3 seconds before the rest of the Royals descended upon those two guys. And it was a very unpleasant encounter for them after that. But I think you can't be sure. And in lieu of certainty, you have to operate under the worst case possible scenario. So, but these are the stories. These are the stories that define and sometimes highlight sports. And these are the kind of stories that often make up great literature, conflict, tension, these sort of things.
And what about wedding? What about engagements, like on the field proposals and this sort of thing? What do you guys think about that?
The Jumbotron and some.
Yeah. There's some drama there,
Yeah, there's drama there. It's tension.
Definitely awkward. I think it's a terrible idea to do it, first of all. I mean, of all the places, in public, especially when you don't really know the answer, that's pretty risky.
Yeah.
I also think about the comedian Bill Burr. He gets upset whenever there's something that's introduced within the realm of sports that comes from real life. That a lot of times we watch sports to get away from real life. Now, a proposal is not as perhaps it's maybe more innocuous than, say, some sort of political stance or some sort of social stance or what have you. But I think, for him, he always said that, he likes sports to be sports. He doesn't want other stuff kind of intruding into that space because that's why we watch sports.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do like it when the guy gets rejected.
That's good stuff. I don't know. I
do
feel
have
bad
to.
for everybody.
Sort of Schadenfreude or something. I don't know.
Indeed.
So, Herr Miller, you were transitioning. You mentioned literature, and I think that's where we wanted to start out. We could, when we have Paul Weinhold on, we could go in so many directions,
Indeed.
And so we think this is the first of many podcasts with Paul, but he has unique expertise. Recently completing a PhD from University of Dallas, and can you tell us a little bit about that degree, what you studied and what you did to secure the title and the all of the knowledge you gained?
Sure, yeah. So I always tell people the best things in my life came from the University of Dallas, and um, and it's a really unique doctoral program. To my knowledge, it's the only doctoral program in the country with a core curriculum and great books. So there are three concentrations in the program. There's a concentration in politics, a concentration in philosophy, and one in literature. And I concentrated in literature, but everyone from all three concentrations takes a sequence of courses in great books of the Western tradition. So there's a course on Homer and Virgil, Plato and Aristotle, Augustine and Aquinas, Hegel, Nietzsche, Dostoevsky, Hobbes, Locke, Rousseau. And so you're reading the same texts together with people who are also reading those texts, but they are coming at them from a slightly different vantage point. And so that was just an incredibly fruitful time for me. It's where I met my wife. It's where I just learned a ton about the history and culture of the West, and built incredible friendships with people during my time there as well. So, and I got to study Shakespeare under a lot of people, actually, because at UD, everybody in the English department wants to teach Shakespeare. So I got to learn primarily from Dr. Scott Kreider, who is a professor in the English department there, author of a book called The Office of Assertion, and also author of a book called With What Persuasion. And his point of emphasis is Shakespeare's rhetorical ethics. Like how do you properly persuade someone of something? How do you lead their soul well toward the true, the good, and the beautiful? Also studied under Gerard Wegemer, who is a Thomas More scholar, and taught a fantastic course called Shakespeare's Histories, as well as Andrew Moran, who taught me a course on early modern drama. Yeah, and I could go on about the professors there. They're outstanding, but just a really formative experience in my life.
Well, tell us about the final piece, because you were in there for a while and you knocked this thing out, which was, I don't know if people, it's a different type of it's not called a dissertation, it's a treatise, and it's a little bit different. I mean, it's a lot longer than a dissertation in where you do a study. That's what you tend to do in education, where you can conduct some type of research and show that you can do a study from the beginning to end. But in this case, you're doing research through documents. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I guess I'm not super familiar with other fields. Like, what is it like in other fields? I mean, is it just what I wrote was longer? Or?
No, they tend, if it's a quantitative study, it tends to be relatively short, 125 pages max, and you do some type of original research. You send out surveys or you do interviews, and then you deal with a lot of data and report it. But it's very structured. You have a chapter where you introduce the problem, and then a full literature review chapter. You talk about your methodology, then you present your results, which could be a bunch of tables or a bunch of quotes from people, depending on the approach you take. And then you tie it all together. So it's very much structured. Everybody does practically the same steps.
Yeah.
And in history, it's you don't have that kind of that explicit explanation, but within it, in telling a story and exploring a story or exploring a part of a story, you're also showcasing various things that everyone has to be able to show that they're capable of doing. Primarily, we're just simply talking about independent research, but the notion of being able to create a defensible argument, not that it's correct, not that it makes sense, but if you're able to make an argument and defend it, that tends to be some of the aspects that you find within the realm of history.
Yep. Well, and it's similar in literature too. I mean, there's definitely an argument that you've got to pursue, but less of a template. Although there are some general guidelines, I suppose. But yeah, certainly no. I didn't do a quantifiable. There were no tables in my research. Although it's interesting. Well, we'll get into it. But what I wrote on was Shakespeare's use of logic in an early narrative poem that he wrote called Lucrece. And it's an 1800 line poem, narrative poem, one of these like mini epics that were written in the 1590s. It was incredibly popular during his life, sold very well, and was a companion piece to another even earlier poem that he wrote called Venus and Adonis. So the basic argument was that in the same way that other people have written about Shakespeare's rhetoric, including my professor, that is studying the various forms and figures that Shakespeare used to craft his masterpieces. I looked at the forms and figures of logic rather than the forms and figures of rhetoric, and it turns out that just wasn't something that had been, not much had been done in that area. In part because gosh, the logical treatises are really difficult to come by. They're difficult to read, not only the content, but also just the format of them. They're all in like early modern typeface and only available through this. It's a really great resource. It's called Early English Books Online, EEBO. I think that's right. So I was like scrolling through all these documents and trying to transcribe them into readable fonts and doing that kind of work. And yeah, that's what I wrote about. So I basically, the argument was that Shakespeare is clearly well educated in logical categories and processes, that there are noticeable traces of that in his writing, and that he had an audience in mind of people who were also well trained in logic, and that he is like clearly playing with those categories in the poem Lucrece.
With regards to Shakespeare, everyone has this preconceived notion, I think, of what Shakespeare is or who Shakespeare was, because they've heard of Hamlet, they've heard of, these various things. And when you get into some of these lesser known works, lesser known from a kind of a layman's perspective, what are people missing about Shakespeare that a more studied individual already knows or knows about him? What makes him different that maybe someone else from the outside doesn't get?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, one thing is that Shakespeare didn't write Hamlet right away. He didn't write The Tempest right away. That there are especially in the early plays and some of these early works, they're outstanding, right? Like in comparison to his contemporaries, they're just like 7 or 8 cuts above. But when you compare those to his later plays, his more mature tragedies, you can see that, you know, he's working some things out with his craftsmanship. So, for example, in Lucrece, oftentimes it's criticized for being a poem that just has way too flowery of language. You know, he sort of has this tendency to chase a metaphor and to make it as complex as possible early in his career. So there's that. You can begin to see the development of an artist by looking at these early works, or these lesser known works. That's definitely one thing. Yeah.
It's something I'm speaking in terms of music, that you don't think about early and late Bach necessarily, but it has to happen. You look some composers like Mozart you can look in that last period and it's very different, and he simplified, if anything. Shakespeare, I think it's a great point. It seems we picture Shakespeare fully formed, almost this god on earth, putting these works, but to think about the development it had to happen.
Yeah, and you can also see artists kind of working things out in their own minds by returning to the same subject again, so that you can start to see with Lucrece, because Lucrece pops up, or elements of that same story pop up in different places in the plays as well. So you even see this with filmmakers, or they're just doing the same thing. I'm thinking about like Wes Anderson films right now. Like, he's always interested in these spaces, and like family dynamics, and the dialogue is often has the same feel to it. So it's interesting to watch someone over the course of their career kind of get more detailed, or create even more complex and interesting manifestations of the same thing.
So Paul, are you familiar with Harold Bloom and the Western canon? Because he talks so much about Shakespeare as really the center of the canon.
Yeah, he wrote this book called Invention of the Human.
Yeah, but essentially talking about the psychology is what happens in those soliloquies and things that's the jump forward, and that you don't really capture that in much that came before or even after.
Right. Yeah. So the soliloquies are interesting, and you see that in Lucrece too. Like, that seems to be something that Shakespeare, like, for example, he invents a soliloquy for Tarquin early on in that poem. It's not in any of the source texts. He just has this dramatic sensibility where he realizes a soliloquy is an opportunity to put on display, right? Like, the inner thoughts and feelings of a person, so that you have this this window, the audience or the reader gets this window into a person's psyche. And that's a fascinating innovation, and something that Shakespeare certainly didn't invent the soliloquy, but he definitely, I think, perfected it. Yeah.
There's a whole field of criticism, people doing a Freudian interpretation of Shakespeare. There's so much there. You're looking at it almost post hoc, but the influence seems to go both ways
between Freud and Shakespeare.
In a way, obviously it can't be both ways, but
yeah, no, I get what you mean.
Yeah, you just wonder how much the psychologists learned from reading that.
Oh, I bet he did. And the thing is that no matter where you are in history, like you're looking at the human being, and you're trying to figure that out. And so many people in the history of certainly the West, which is what I've studied, like they're noticing the same things and pointing up different aspects, of the human person. And so, yeah, whether it's a psychologist like Freud or a dramatist like Shakespeare, all of those things are going to come to the surface. And with geniuses, that's going to be there's going to be a commonality between all of them. That's for sure. Yeah.
When you look at some of the stuff that he wrote and some of the ways in which it's studied, and you two have already kind of mentioned some of them, be it logic or philosophy or, what have you, what was his intent as he wrote this stuff? Was he intending to try to write something that spoke specifically on logic? Was he trying specifically to write something that spoke to some elements of philosophy? Or was he just an individual who was a writer, who wanted to write, who had a desire to write, and probably also make money at the same time? And he wrote these things as a kind of those first steps in doing so? Or did he have a larger plan in mind?
Yeah. Oh man, there's so much there. So he certainly needed to make a living, and he certainly wanted to entertain. That was part and parcel of the work that he was doing. And that meant entertaining multiple audiences, whether you're talking about, plebeians or royalty, nobility, and also importantly, an audience from a society called the Inns of Court, which was think of them like social clubs for lawyers, right? So these were people who were really well educated, university educated, et cetera. So he had that, like there was this entertainment side. But then you can also see in like, for example, his history plays, you can see that there's a definite purpose to them and a thoughtfulness about the history of England. And when you're putting a people's own history on display for them to think about, right? That can't just be purely entertainment, right? Because they're pondering their own past and their own origins, and they're being required to ponder their own system of government, and so you can see him bringing his audience through that experience, I think, in a very purposeful way, to help them see the need for self-government, and to also ponder like what's the nature of tyranny. How does one deal with a tyrant? Those are all definitely important questions. Questions about the nature of love, of romantic love, and of partnerships that are likely to continue well into the future, and ones that aren't. Right. That you certainly see him presenting different options, never in a way that's like a lecture or that provides like Shakespeare's answer to this question, but he's always trying to put those things to bring before his audience or his readers' eyes the various possibilities, and to show some of them working out better than others. And implicit is maybe you should choose the ones that are going to work out better.
Let's hope so.
Would you say that that's part of his relevance today? I mean, not that, no one needs to hear from me about why Shakespeare is relevant today, but I mean, do you think that that's why he still resonates, is because of what he touches on and how he does it?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I mean, he's, performed more often than probably any other playwright, whether you're talking about high school productions or, out here in Phoenix, we've got the Southwest Shakespeare Company, and a variety of interpretations, right? So one thing about Shakespeare is that his language seems to be able to capture so many different dramatic interpretations by the actors. I mean, that it's just a playground for them that allows them to be creative in a way that's just I mean, you can't quantify it. So that's one thing. And then I think Shakespeare is always able to capture, to dwell, I should say, on a particular emotion or a particular moment of dramatic tension, and just really, where other dramatists or filmmakers even will sort of brush past it and not sit with the complexity of that moment, Shakespeare will force his audience to really look at it closely. And I think that's powerful because people want a connection to these moments. They want to engage their sympathies, and Shakespeare provides those opportunities. So that's a human kind of connection that goes beyond, the particular history of a particular nation, or goes beyond any sort of ideological notions or philosophies. It's just something that's very visceral and human that we want to connect with. And then, of course, now that we're in a tradition that's been informed by Shakespeare, so much of the literature that has occurred after him has referred back to his stories. And so it's part of the rich fabric of who we are. And yeah, he does continue to resonate. Yeah, for sure.
So we're all in education and K-12 specifically. And you mentioned dwelling, and I mean, that sounds like a whole book right there. There's so many examples of that. And it seems to be something that's missing in our culture today. We tend to brush through everything and play music as background to other things. But what about teaching Shakespeare, not abridged texts or little summaries, but actually teaching Shakespeare in schools? Can you give me some examples of maybe what you do at Great Hearts and what you think about it?
Sure. Yeah, I think we should do it. We should do that as much as possible.
Well, there you go. That's the answer right there.
Yeah. I think Shakespeare is really powerful for young people, and it's just so enjoyable in a class to read Shakespeare aloud, to experience Shakespeare performed by professional actors, whether on film or going to visit a live performance. So I was talking with a teacher recently who does something super interesting. She is a drama. Is she teaching drama or humane letters? I can't remember now. I think it may be a humane letters class, but her classroom just happens to be right next to another room that's used for drama, right? So she'll have a seminar with her students where they're all talking about, I don't know, Romeo and Juliet, say. And then there'll be a question about how do we interpret this line? And then the answer will be, well, let's try and interpret it this way. And then we'll try and interpret it another way by going over to this room next to us, and we'll actually just perform it. And so the test of interpretation is, can you perform it or not? Like, does it work or not? It's so fascinating to have a class where you're not just, it's certainly not a lecture about the text. It's not merely a seminar about the text, but it's also including this performance aspect. You can only do that with dramatic works. And
so it moves beyond theory and makes it a practical exploration. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. So yeah, you can do that kind of stuff with Shakespeare. And Shakespeare's poetry, it's the kind of thing that people want to memorize, and has certainly influenced many thinkers in the West, think about Abraham Lincoln watching Macbeth over and over again.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think we should teach Shakespeare as much as possible to young people.
Wonderful.
Now there's been some.
Go ahead, Ross.
Now there's been some. I was a fan of the show West Wing, and there's an episode where Martin Sheen, who plays the president, refers to a modern translation of a text as the James Bond version. I'm wondering, do you feel that there is something inherently problematic with using more modern translations? You see this a lot of times. The conversation tends to center on the Bible, where Jesus comes across more like a hipster than like a prophet or what have you. Do you find that there's an issue with doing it that way, or do you think there's something inherently worthy about trying to understand the text as it was originally constructed?
Yeah, I've got to admit I'm an original text kind of guy. I think there's just something that is lost. There's certainly, meter and rhyme that may be lost in the poem, the poetry itself. Even in a drama, it's often written in iambic pentameter, and that's not insignificant to the work, right? Like, and it comes down also to an understanding of what it is that we're doing or reading a work of literature, or whether that's dramatic or a novel or a lyric poem or what have you. Because a student or anyone might actually ask this question genuinely, and not just being snarky, but they could ask, well, why can't you just give me the summary of this? Like, if what I'm supposed to get out of this text, right, is, I don't know, be a better person, or
Right.
some lesson about love, or some lesson about happiness, or what have you, if that's what I'm supposed to get out of it, then why can't I just get the prosaic sort of summary version of that and say, thank you very much. Now I'm going to go change my life. I promise I will. You know what I mean? Why do I have to read this? I don't know.
Really?
Let's say it's Dostoevsky, like 500-page novel or something. And I think the answer is that unless you go through the imploded experience of reading through this story, unless you have the engagement of your sympathies, and unless you are experiencing the language that is used in the story, then you're not experiencing the story anymore.
Mhm.
Right? You're just, what you're doing is something else. And so it's important to realize, like, that literature and the experience of encountering it is something different than just extracting a lesson or a moral, and that experience is worth having for its own sake, and I think it also has salutary effects for us as human beings.
I think about Walt Whitman, and give me a summary of this poem, and what kind of experience are you going to have at that point, without the text? Shakespeare has been part of this long-standing joke about how monkeys, if given enough time, could compose the complete works of Shakespeare. And now we're at that point where we have the monkeys at a way. So can you defend Shakespeare, Paul, against the monkeys?
Yeah, I talked with a colleague of mine who is a philosopher, and he was telling me that this was years ago, so I'll probably misremember some of the details, but he was telling me that there were some graduate students that actually did a study of this very thing. Because you hear this all the time, like, you put enough monkeys in a room and they'll write Hamlet.
Yeah.
And that they were like, well, let's try it. So they did. And it turned out that the monkeys, I think a line from the study was, they really liked the F key. Because they just hit the same button over and over.
Love it.
And so, but the study was actually making an important philosophical point about the difference between intelligence and something else that monkeys have. I don't know what it would be, right? Like some sort of cleverness or something, right? Like that there's something that Shakespeare was doing when he was creating these stories. That was the application of his intelligence to the source material, to the actors that he had to work with, the Globe Theater that he had to work with, and all of those factors, right? That he was applying that to those circumstances. And then this isn't just sort of random events occurring over time. That intelligence is something different than that. So, yeah.
So we don't need to worry about the robots and the chatbot replacing, but I think the challenge is to get people, teach students and adults to know the difference, and that's the scarier part of the argument is do you have access to Shakespeare anymore?
Well, yeah, I guess in some ways we've never had more access to him in terms of just printed books and availability online and all of that. But yeah, the question is, do we have the kind of training and just attention that is needed to do him justice? Those things are certainly under assault for sure. Yeah,
it's very much like listening to great classical music, and they often take a little time for them to, the more you listen to them, they become more meaningful. And then you do this wonderful thing musically, you start to anticipate what's going to come next, and then you're in the moment. And I think the same thing is when you're reading great literature, you need to be in a frame where you're anticipating, then you're being delighted by what's different.
Yeah, that's right.
It's also that, to go back to something you were saying earlier, as far as like, how do you teach Shakespeare? One of the things that I was kind of drawn to with the kid, snarky or not, who said, what's the point of this? That it turns Shakespeare into like a litany of pithy little sayings that become kind of intermixed with lesser minds and lesser talents, and it really kind of reduces Shakespeare to some sort of English version of fortune cookie, kind of wit and witticisms. I mean, should Shakespeare be taught for the values that are found within, or as you said, is there something about going through the process itself that should be more stressed?
Yeah, so I think you discover the virtues that make for human flourishing by watching the choices of the characters in his plays, right? Like, certainly not every character should be emulated, right? Like, shouldn't emulate Iago. Probably not a good idea. And so that process, it seems to me, is cultivating a kind of prudence in the reader, because one way to think about it is that, as human beings, we get one life, but when you're reading Shakespeare and other great literature, you get a chance to see how other kinds of lives turn out and then learn from that and incorporate it into the one life that you get to live. And that's what I mean by the salutary effect of it, right? Like, it's different than saying we just draw this moral lesson out of a work of literature. That I don't think is right. But it's not as though reading great texts, and particularly imaginative texts, it's not as though that doesn't have an ethical implication for us. Yeah.
So I feel like we're just at the beginning of a conversation here. And I will admit to the audience that we recorded 2 weeks ago, and we got into some very different things. We had a whole different conversation talking about leadership and and it's a conversation that no one will hear, which has some philosophy behind that too. Does a conversation with three people even occur if you don't hit record, or is it just gone into the ether forever? But we had
It's in our memory.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Yes.
It's someplace. But I want to thank Paul. I think that we should start here and continue this conversation. And we want to learn a lot about your work and about Great Hearts and schools and baseball. And I think the reason that Ross wanted you on is because you all can, team up on me now and both. Whatever you would call it. You love baseball, and I can't really make fun of two of you at once because I'm outnumbered.
Yeah, well, hopefully this reverses the trend. So when we were talking last time, the Rangers were doing really well, and I was very excited about them. And in the intervening period, they have hit a little bit of a slump. So we'll hope that they kick it back into high gear.
That's putting it nicely, I think.
Yeah, it is. They're kind of falling apart right now.
Yeah,
it's possible. It's possible the two of you jinxed them. You were overconfident. But I don't know if you can unjinx a team. Maybe it happens. You never know.
Superstition works both ways. So I think I'm confident that our commiseration is going to turn things around now.
Okay,
so
now this
take anything.
It's a year long. It used to be done in September or October. It's like a year round sport now. It's going to be. What are they going to be playing in December as well? How long does this thing last?
They should.
We'll go through October. It's the summer months in Phoenix are baseball months, right? So April through October when it's 100 plus.
There's no better time to be outside enjoying the wonders.
That's right.
Wow. But you are indoors there, I hope, watching those games in person. Is that correct, Paul?
Yeah, there's definitely a dome or it's a retractable roof, I believe, on Chase Field. But it's definitely closed.
I will say this about Chase Field. I remember when we went, the temperature during the day was like well over 100. And when we got into our seats, about an hour early, I think, as you do, to kind of survey the scene, kind of soak in the ambiance. And about 30 minutes before the game started, they opened the roof. And I thought, well, that's insane. It's, but, this is the joke about dry heat. People joke about dry heat, but as soon as that sun goes away, it's quite pleasant when you're watching a game at Chase Field, even with the roof open and the AC going, which there's its own ecological issues there. But nevertheless, you're quite comfortable. And it's a beautiful place, beautiful park, nice place to watch a game. So, it's an enclosed stadium, but sometimes you don't need it.
Yep, absolutely.
So, all right. Well, with that, we'll wrap things up. I am so psyched because I think one of the fun things about talking to other folks is being able to hear about other people's expertise. And it's always fun hearing smart people talk about smart things and interesting things. And so we're very grateful that you could make it a second time here with us.
Yes.
As we say, adieu, Herr Dr. Bourgeois.
Adieu. Auf Wiedersehen, Herr Miller and Dr. Weinhold. Many thanks.
Likewise, guys. Thank you.